Hey, it's a Mad Master. Welcome to my channel. This video is about some bad news that we heard about today. It's Edward Van Halen has died at the age of 65, and I'll tell you about the impact of Van Halen on my life and the influence that he has had and his band, his namesake band. So I got into Van Halen when I was about 12 years old. I was getting into metal and stuff, and I listened to Fair Warning quite a bit, and also, strangely enough, I really got into the 5150 album. It's still probably my favorite album by them, for various reasons. I know it's controversial because very AOR, but I really like a lot of the melodies and the Steinberger guitar usage on there. That's the headless guitar that he had had that unique sound. A lot of the proggy Alan Holdsworthy kind of stuff on that album really appeals to me too. And Sammy Hagar is not as annoying on that album as later ones, in my opinion. But you know, think what you may with that. So I got into a lot of the Van Halen growing up. Uh, some of the stuff I learned. I wouldn't say Van Halen was as formative as like the first things that I learned on guitar were Black Flag, Black Sabbath, and Iron Maiden. The first three songs, The Trooper, Nervous Breakdown, and War Pigs. Maybe one of the I don't. It was either Iron Man or War Pigs. Maybe it was both. I can't remember. But then I got into. I learned some Ozzy stuff like from like Crazy Train guitar. I had a guitar teacher growing, when I was a teenager, taught me all this stuff. So Van Halen definitely had an impact though as far as tapping. I did tapping because of him and because of Randy Rhoads, some others, and a lot of my songs do have tapping in them that I write. Of course, he didn't invent tapping, blah blah blah. You can say whatever you want about that, but definitely popularized that type of playing. Interesting thing about Eddie Van Halen, is that he was very influenced by prog rock and like jazz fusion and stuff. But he would take something that was kind of a staple in prog rock and really like more obscure, even obscure prog rock, and like some of these ideas with the guitar and riffs and the way he wrote, and he would take them and put them in this more mainstream mainstream popular hard rock format. And that was a pretty genius idea. It's like you listen to a lot of the early Van Halen, there's some really oddball stuff in there that you wouldn't even realize unless you were like really analyzing the music on a higher level, because they made it seem so simple, but it wasn't. It was deceptively complex. Like a lot of good music is deceptively complex or deceptively simple. That's just kind of a thing. So I wasn't into Van Halen as much like in my later teen years, because I was really getting into a lot of European metal and stuff, and I kind of looked down upon some of the cheesier 80s stuff, and I kind of lumped that in with Van Halen for a while. But then in like my early 20s, I kind of got back into that stuff, and also like the first time I got into Scorpions and like Willie John Roth, Michael Schenker, and then back into Van Halen and stuff. And my it's basically my first band, Cyclic Creation. I had to buy an amp, that was metal and like would fit into the mix of the band. So I had a PV Butcher, which was my first tube amp, and then they had this 5150, which I have over there, which sadly I'm actually selling because I'm moving and I desperately need. It's kind of a gentleman's deal with someone who I'm renting from right now that I'm giving this. So instead of paying rent, but I'm giving my 51. It's ironic because I'm getting rid of my 5150 and then Van Halen dies. It's kind of sad. So I have the 5150 block letter head, and I've used it on a lot of stuff. I'm gonna actually probably use it now, like this next month. I'm probably gonna record a fuck ton of stuff with it because obviously I'm in honor of Van Halen dying, and it's one of the staples of metal. So one of the things about Van Halen, Edward Van Halen, is that he is like an innovator, not only in music terms, but actually in like musical instrument terms. Because like the 5150, to me, I kind of figured this out years back. So you have this Soldano amps that were the SLO 100, and you have the Marshall JCM 800. So I think basically this is my theory. I think the 5150 is kind of an attempt to like bridge the gap between those two amps, because you have that rhythm channel that's more Marshally. So it doesn't really have a true clean channel, especially the original amp. At least the first one, the PV one. It doesn't have a real clean channel. It has a rhythm channel, right? It's like a Marshall. It doesn't have a. I mean, the original JCM 800 or Super Leads didn't have a clean channel. So that's what Van Halen was trying to do with that amp, and that led to the amp designer, who also his name is James Brown. He was a PV electronics engineer. He also designed. I don't think he designed the Butcher, but he the PV Ultra and like VTM, which was a sound. Actually, Soundgarden used that, or Kim Thale did. And he went on to design the Triple X, the JSX, and some other high-profile amps for the company. And I think the 5150 was his like masterpiece, though, because so many bands have used that. And when I see a band live, and if they're paying, and I'll get to this in a minute, but the 5150 has just been, it sounds so good cranked up with some of these bands like Carcass, Arch Enemy. I've seen Steel Panther use it, Devin Townsend, countless bands, and it always sounds good. There's something about it. It's a great job that he did designing that amp, or helping design that amp. So you got that, and you have this 51. And what surprised me was when the Fender acquired all the Van Halen stuff, or he signed the deal with Fender to design guitars and amps. The 5153 was just as good, if not better, than the original 5150. And I was like kind of astounded, because I saw Carcass again when they were using 5153s, and that was just like, holy shit, that sounds good. It made me want to get one, And I mean, I'm probably going to get one eventually. I have a dual rectifier as well. I have a bunch of amps, so I mean, it's not like I'm starving for amps. And then I have this new Moore GE 200, which is pretty killer too, and I can do a lot of tones with that. So, but 5150 was an inspirational thing. There's a lot of memories in that too. That amp that I'm having to give away, but because paying rent with it, basically, essentially. So, because I have to afford this new apartment, which is fucking skyrocketing my rent, but this new apartment I'm moving into. So, a lot of memories with that amp. I played a lot of shows. Also, Van Halen designed, the D-Tuna, which is never caught on, but I still think it's a neat idea. It's basically your E string. You can tune to D. You just twist this thing on. It's on a Floyd Rose tremolo. Getting back to that, Floyd Rose tremolos, they were kind of this late 70s, early 80s invention by this guy named Floyd Rose. And they're on most guitars I play, because I like to have them in tune. And I also like to do dive bombs and all that stuff. It's a double locking tremolo. You know what that is if you play guitar. And Eddie Van Halen popularized that. He was I think he was friends with Floyd Rose, and he had him on all his guitars, and then everybody started playing those. Everybody started, and even Neil Scone of Journey had one on a Les Paul, which is blasphemy at the time, but I guess it's kind of a classic thing now if you like Journey. So, and he did a lot of other stuff. He designed some kind of a. If you look at the patent office, like the U.S. Patent Office, Eddie Van Halen is like a few other designs, like for this thing where you could play guitar like a keyboard and all this kind of shit. Like, he was very inventive, and his riffs were inventive, and he was very much an innovator at guitar. There was nobody in the 80s who wasn't influenced by him. I mean, Yngwie Malmsteen, Iron Maiden, I mean, Adrian Smith probably didn't pick up tapping in pubs in England. I sincerely doubt. I think Diamond had some tapping on the Am I Evil, as far as I recall. I doubt he did. These guys were very. I mean, there were other people that did tapping, but not like Van Halen did. and it was just very influential. And Van Halen's band, they influenced so many people, and bands that it's kind of like with Pantera, where they did influence some things that weren't quite as good, weren't quite the best things. I mean, a lot of the hair bands were influenced by Van Halen, but they're also influenced by Kiss, which was one of my favorite bands. So like, yeah, but across the spectrum, I always thought Van Halen was a really unique, quirky, eccentric guy. If you saw him in interviews, he had kind of a personality that was like, it kind of was a little bit like, I think there's a guitarist archetype, and I've talked to people about this, and it's like they're a little bit more quiet than the lead singer, but they also have this weird like standoffishness about them, or they might have a little bit of Asperger's, or be a little bit eccentric or whatever. So I think like Van Halen. I'm not saying Van Halen is like Asperger's, but I'm just saying like he had this weird thing. He had a lot of struggles too, a lot of horrible things that happened to him with. And I don't know why he got so heavily into drugs and alcohol and smoking. He lived on his nerves. He was, had a lot of personal struggles. It's really sad. But he's a musician, which musicians, as I know, being one, you have this burning thing inside that you cannot quell a lot of the time, and sometimes it goes out of control. So he died of I think it was throat cancer, and it's unfortunate because I seem to maybe remember that he did have I don't know if he was smoking still after his cancer diagnosis, and I'm not blaming smoking, but I seem to remember like some kind of footage of him more recently where he was smoking a cigarette, which he blamed. This is just the kind of personality he was. He blamed using putting metal guitar picks in his mouth, doing the tapping. This is not a metal guitar pick. This is a Petrucci Jazz 3 ripoff thing that he did for this pick company. So he blamed using metal picks on his tongue cancer, and then he got throat cancer, and he's gone. So one of the things that bothers me about that the most was, in my head, I always wanted to hear a solo album with Van Halen, like doing actual instrumental songs. I love the songs with vocals and stuff, but we never got to hear that. Paul Gilbert took him years to do an instrumental album. He finally did it, and he's doing a bunch of them now. He's done a bunch of them. George Lynch, same way. Yngwie Malmsteen, here and there, he'll do plenty. The thing about Yngwie Malmsteen is that he'll do plenty of instrumentals on an album. He'll do like 2 or 3 instrumentals. So we got that covered, even though he's not. I don't think he's done a full instrumental album. The first album was Rising Force, was mostly instrumental, but that's fine. And I think that he has it covered. But Van Halen should have done. I think, in my opinion, it would have been great if he did more instrumental stuff. That was my wish. And even more recently, I was like, man, there's nothing we've heard about Van Halen in a long time. Maybe he should do an instrumental album. Come on, when is it going to come out? So, but now, unless you have stuff in the vault, which he probably does, anybody with a home studio that's on that creative level. And I've heard this about, there's rumors about unreleased stuff from people like Van Halen or Prince. There's a certain personality, I'm not going to, they're air signs, astrology, whatever. Yeah, it's true though. Like people that have this certain thing where they have a home studio and they've recorded a bunch of stuff, have a lot of unreleased stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if Van Halen had a lot of stuff in the vaults. Because you look at that last studio album they did, that was basically stuff from the vault that they kind of mixed and then added stuff to, and all that stuff. So it's pretty interesting. We'll probably hear more Van Halen music now. I think we will. I think we will hear more Van Halen because there's probably stuff in the vault. I predict they'll do one more album with David Lee Roth. They probably already had some demos that they'll polish up, and Wolfgang will polish them up with Roth and Alex, and they'll get one more album out. Who knows? Maybe Sammy Hagar will be involved too, or I know people will be like, no, but that maybe there will. But Gary Sharon, it's really interesting, But the legacy is deserved, A lot of people might call him overrated, and I understand that, but he really influenced a lot of people, including me. I mean, I don't think I would have been doing tapping if it weren't for him, but I think I got into it because of Randy Rhoads too, but he was one of the first that I've heard of, you know. So it's like, you know, there's other things I do on guitar that people would be surprised where I get them from, like pinch harmonics I get from John Christ of Danzig. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff, you know, there's a lot of different things that go into a guitarist's influences. But Van Halen was certainly an influence on me as far as all that stuff goes. I mean, one of the first things I did was tap on a guitar. That's when one of the first things I learned was how to tap in my father's basement, and a long time ago on this neon green Kramer guitar. That's another thing he popularized, is Kramer guitars and bright colors in rock. And you know, he's quite an eccentric guy. Genius. He was a genius. Like some of the stuff, very weird music theory. If you look at it, it's like, what? And I had this debate a long time ago with someone. Speaking of that, so we were debating Steve Vai versus Eddie Van Halen. Like, I was saying that Eddie Van Halen is more of an innovator than Steve Vai, and he's like, no, Steve Vai knows music theory more. Well, whatever. You know, I think Eddie Van Halen had influenced more people than Steve Vai ever will, and I like Steve Vai a lot. He did. You don't have to know. You know, Eddie Van Halen, kind of like Hawthorne, a few other people of those that ilk. They like to say a lot of stuff that's not necessarily like they like to play off a lot of. I think I don't know if it's trolling, but like they'll say something like, "Oh, I didn't know music theory," or "I didn't, you know, I wasn't influenced by Venom," or whatever. It's like people say a lot of hyperbole. We don't know exactly what happened. And then you read something else that's contradictory later. That's just the way they are. They like to kind of have a little bit of a mystique on about certain things. And you know, I don't know if I like that exaggerated hyperbole, as you know, a certain person likes to call it. But it, you know, it does happen with musicians. They'll say something like, I think Eddie lied about his age to get into clubs when Van Halen first formed. There's all sorts of weird tales and hearsay about all sorts of stuff. About amp he used. Was it modded? Was it not modded? Was the Variac, you know, he used a Variac, or what is, you know, all this stuff. You know, there's a lot of weird stuff that weird mythology that goes with music like Van Halen. But anyways, you know, I thought he was a big influence on musicians worldwide, no doubt. You know, and it's kind of funny because today I was on this guitarist channel. It's before I heard the news, and I actually commented that I would love to see him transcribe the song 5150 because the riff was so cool. And then I find out, and then I was going to play my 5150 to record some songs. I'm like, whoa, that's weird synchronicity there. Okay. But anyways, that's all I got to say. Rest in peace, Edward Van Halen. And I watched Bill and Ted too, by the way, today. The new movie. But you know, I'm not going to do a review in this video because this is all about Eddie. So, but anyways, that's all. Peace out.